Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined, as always, by Sam. We got a lot to get to from the U.S. Grand Prix today. Pretty good race. It had some lulls, had its low points, but all in all, there was a lot to take from it from a championship perspective. First off, though, Sam, how are you? How did you enjoy your weekend getting to watch a home race for us in the United States?
I'm doing great. Yeah, Austin's one of those races we always look forward to being the home race. It was the first race that the two of us attended as F1 fans in person. So, always something that's going to be exciting for us. Like you said, kind of an up and down race in terms of excitement, but we certainly got an exciting weekend as far as the championship and it looks like we got a lot of drama here to wind down the season. A lot of good on track drama. So excited for that and excited to talk it all over.
Yeah, just a lot overall to take away. First off, I think we have to start with, Max's just magnificent weekend. Just really an incredible weekend for him, and one that I think really just brings him completely back into the title fight. I think everyone, the buzz and the hype was getting bigger and bigger, but after this, I think it's just it's got definitely to a fever pitch now of can he actually do this thing? And I feel like that there was, kind of a vibe shift in the championship as well this weekend. Um, Last weekend as well, just with everything that took place, not last weekend, but the last race in Singapore, with the McLarens and everything else. But now with what Max has done, I think it's just gotten to a different point, a different level of that there is a real chance that he can do this. So I feel like that there's been a real vibe shift in the championship overall. And I think that the main takeaway has to be, can Max actually do it? Can he come back from this incredible deficit that he's found himself in?
Yeah, I texted you on Saturday after the sprint race and said this is the first time I really felt like Max could win the title. I know that we've talked about it on our last couple of shows and as an outside possibility, and I basically said, it's fun to think about, but we got to wait a couple more races here. We got to hold our horses, and it's done a complete 180. I mean, I we were talking earlier over text as well about the betting odds, and now Max in some places is the favorite to win the championship, even though he's down 40 points with 5 races in the sprint left. I mean, that's pretty magnificent to be down 40 points and still be a championship favorite this late in the season. So I think certainly not only is this the first time that I feel like it's possible for him to win the title, it's a real possibility. And right now he has all the momentum since the summer break. McLaren's aren't even they're behind Max and George. Neither of them are even the number 2 driver since summer break, and Max and that car is also rounded into form. Both Max and the car clearly show that I wouldn't say it's their championship to lose. One incident, one bad moment for Max, it could be too much to overcome still with this little time left, but he's right there and he's right in the thick of it, and I really feel that way for the first time.
Yeah, I agree. It's the first time for me too, where felt like before this it was, oh, it's fun to think about. It's still a long shot. He's driving really well, but it's just it seems too far fetched for it to become reality. There's always that outside chance, but just feels like the McLarens are going to be able to hold on. But this weekend, you're right. It's felt different. It's felt real. And I don't know, obviously, a big points haul, a big points gain has a lot to do with that. He got that in Baku as well. A bigger points haul there actually than what he got here. But just getting a little bit closer, this one felt a lot more significant. And, just look at his results post summer break, just in these last 4, 5, 6, 7 races here. He's got a fourth at the Belgian Grand Prix, and then he goes second, first, second, first. Before that, he was a ninth, a fifth, a second, a fourth, a 10th, and 18th Like it's just something has definitely changed. Whether that's his confidence level, whether that's his uh, just the car has changed. I think both of those things are there. I don't think Max ever loses his confidence. Um, but having a car underneath you that can actually win races, changes your confidence in a different way. Just knowing you can go out there and win versus knowing you can go out there and if everyone, two or three guys crash in front of you, you can win. So it's definitely a different mentality that Max has right now. And also, he just always has a different mentality because that's who he is. But yeah, it's definitely like something in these last 4, 5, 6 races has definitely clicked for him. It couldn't come at a better time, and I just think that if he can keep up this form, it's right there for him. It's not like it's it's not like you said, he still can't really have anything go wrong for him. A mechanical failure or getting involved in an incident would probably put him out of it. But it's all right there in front of him, for him to go take it, and he can do that with the races that we have remaining.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me right now that there's going to be no mechanical failures, no turn one incidents, anything like that, I would say that there's a very, very good chance that Max wins this title. I mean, it's been all momentum since the summer break, like I mentioned. I mean, just this weekend alone, he makes up 23 points on Piastri. And, that sprint incident, it doesn't seem like a big deal when you think about sprint, only 8 points for a win and then only 1 point for each place after. It's not something that you normally make a big difference, but both McLarens going out, that's another 8 point cushion. That for a normal weekend, that would be the difference between first and ninth, the total difference of the weekend between Max and Oscar instead of first to fifth. So just really something special that we're seeing, and it really couldn't have played out any better this weekend for Max. Obviously, with 2 wins, that kind of makes sense. But even with the results of the McLarens as well, double DNF, and then Oscar underperforming in the feature race as well. Obviously, other than mechanical failure or something. And at the end of the day, that's not the way these guys want to win anyways. They want to win on track and all, in relatively equal machinery. They all want to prove that they can be the best. So bar that, from a points perspective, it couldn't have gone any better this weekend for Max and for Red Bull.
Yeah, Max, he's at a point right now where if he wins every race out, and he wins both sprint races out, and Piastri finishes second in all of those, he would still come up 1 point shy. So he does technically need, something to happen. He can't just win out all of the races and then, be champion from here. That would be difficult anyways, because I still think, like we saw last race out, George, and Mercedes can come out of nowhere and steal a race, steal those points, or maybe the Ferraris do the same. Obviously, the McLarens will have those opportunities as well, even though the car doesn't look as good. So, he's going to need something to go his way still, but it's much more of a reality, and it's much more of a, this thing is real. And if I was either of the McLaren drivers right now, I'd be pretty concerned about the guy who's in third place in the championship, because it's just the like, once you get Max on this form, with a car that he's good with, and you get that confidence going, it's just like it's a snowball going downhill. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to avalanche. And those McLaren guys, yeah, they're both good drivers, but I don't think they hold a candle to what Max is able to do when everything's going his way.
No, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more about the ranking of kind of where all the drivers are once the season actually ends. But I think right now it's Max and then everyone else. And we've said that before, but it's not really competition. I mean, Oscar and Lando both have great moments. They both had great laps, and I'm sure you throw them all in an equal car, there would have been some times where Oscar or Lando got the better of Max throughout this year. But week to week, I feel like nobody's maximizing it as well as he does, just getting the absolute best out of that car, and a car that's been frustrating at times throughout this year. Finally, now it's rounding into form for him, and now we're seeing why he's so special, why he's has a potential to go down. He's already, somewhere on that list of all-time greats. He has a potential to move even further up that list with the true elite of the elite if he can win this title. And right now, I think he's got a real good shot to.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the time I really didn't think it would matter. It felt already pretty far fetched for him at this point in the championship. But you think back to what happened in Spain, where Max purposefully drives into George, loses, all those points, goes from I think third or fourth, what they were fighting for, to 10th. And those points could be very crucial in this championship in the end. And I don't think Max thought that at the time. I don't think anyone really thought that at the time. And even up to 3 races ago, I don't think anybody really thought that those points would matter. But they they really could come back to matter in the end, which is pretty crazy. Thinking back to that moment, and if this thing is decided by that, if Max blames himself for that, or if he blames other points in the season, or just lack of performance from the car, or what goes on mentally there, just going back to that moment for him.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of moments I think you can look at for all three guys throughout this year that
Mm-hmm.
will kind of come back to haunt them. For the two that don't win it, it's crazy to think about that Max moment in Spain with George, and sort of the fallout from that. I mean, uh, he would have been right there, even closer. Would have been an even bigger favorite now to win the drivers' championship, and that's why every race matters, even when it feels like you might be out of it, when it feels like, kind of feels like all was lost. I mean, even if they weren't fighting for the title, it still matters for, where you're at in the standings. It matters a lot for the team and for your perception going forward in the sport. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, when you get in a title race like this, it really sort of reflects how much every little thing matters in F1, and how much that, down to the thousandth of the second on a stop clock in qualifying, or a quarter of an inch in the race that clips off a front wing or something, or punctures a tire, that can change a season. And it really is a game of inches, even more than any other sport.
Yeah, no, you're right. Everyone's going to have, all 3 of these guys are going to have something to look back on. Or I guess 2 of them, the 2 that don't win, as to why they didn't win it. But it just felt like that Max one, it was obviously just such an unforced error of him, a mental mistake, just letting the heat of the moment get to him. That I think that one would probably stand out if it comes down to that in the end. But do you think, you look at the odds now after the race, Max, at some sports books he's tied for the best odds to win the championship. Others, he's in the lead now odds wise to win the championship. Do you think there's any other guy out there on the grid that could, 40 points down with 5 races left, 2 sprints as well, be leading or tied for leading in the odds to win the championship right now? I just, to me, I don't see anyone else on the grid that could be in that position and have that much confidence from the fans. But not sure if you have anybody else that you think would be there.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think uh, maybe your Russells and Leclercs would be a little closer. Maybe Hamilton, if he was more in tune with the car. Certainly, if this was a Hamilton in the prime Mercedes days, and they just had a bad start to the season, making a comeback, I definitely could have seen that. Um, Same with Pico Alonso, for example. But I think right now there's
No.
nobody that would have this level of confidence from the fans. It feels like almost an inevitability from the standpoint of the fans, even though it's really not that. I mean, McLaren could have two good races out of the five and win this championship.
Mhm.
Uh, Either driver could, but it just like from the perspective of a fan, it just feels like he's coming and there's nobody that's going to be able to stop him on his path. So uh, I just don't think there's anybody else active that you would put up there. And really, I think there's very few guys all time that if you put them in this position, that there would be so much confidence from the fans and a fear kind of from the other guys that this guy's on his way and there's not much you can do to stop.
I think the only other guy is Hamilton, right? I think just based on obviously, one of the greatest to ever do it in the sport. Um, but also if he had, this record of, past races like Max had, 3-4 wins, a couple seconds in a row, and he was 40 points back with 5 races left. I think that the sports books might give him similar odds, partially just because casual bettors might see, oh, Hamilton is in the championship fight. I'm going to bet on him because I know that I know what kind of driver he is and all that. I think obviously I think that plays into it as well. But he's also the only other guy on the grid right now that's proven it to the level that Max has. Fernando has, but it's been a really long time. So Lewis is really the only other guy that I think would kind of have that effect, on the other drivers, on the fans, and kind of the market as a whole. But yeah, it's really Hamilton in a similar situation or Verstappen. And I think
Yeah,
Verstappen also is more favorable to win.
yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would agree with Lewis being in there. I think, obviously in that situation where he was closer to the championship, he would be more in tune with the car. So that kind of defeats the point of it, I guess. But yeah, I agree. Just given his record, 7 championships, over 100 wins, one of the best of all time. Yeah, he would absolutely be in that conversation as well. But I think at the moment, right now, I think there's nobody quite on Max's level, even Hamilton included. Just off of what we've seen the last couple of years. I know the car hasn't been the same, but he's had plenty of disappointments, and hopefully, I would love to see Ferrari get back on track next year, and we could see those two battle it out some more because they're really two of the best of all time, and I definitely miss seeing them battle it out on track. Feels like we don't get it as much anymore.
Yeah, one more thing on Max before we move on to the McLaren guys. If Max is able to come back and win this championship, just in the manner that he's going about it, obviously not the best car on the grid for the entire season. You could make the argument that it was the same last year as well. And then the first championship he had with the battle with Lewis, one of the all-time championship battles. 2022, the first half he was challenged. The second half he ran away with it. 2023 was what it was. It was pure domination. A guy in a car that was just unbeatable for the entirety of a season. Essentially, there was a couple other wins, but domination like we'd never seen. This championship win would definitely stand out to me. Just in the way that he would have to go and win it coming from behind like this. There were highs and there were lows in that Hamilton battle, but he never would have had to come back from this length behind. And last year, not having the best car also was, a hard championship to win. But this one to me would be his best. And I think it would definitely make the question, a lot heavier and have a lot more weight to the conversation of if Max would be, considered by some to be the greatest of all time after this, if he's able to come back and win this championship. I just think, coming back from over 100 points down just in the second half of the season alone, in obviously an inferior car, in a car right now that's not even second in the constructors championship. It's just it would be an insane victory, an insane championship, and to me would definitely vault him more into that conversation than he already even is. I think right now he'd be in like, you know, a top 5 conversation, but I think that would push him into an all-time, you know, great champion, or a great champion conversation.
Yeah, I think the crazy thing, if you think about it, the first title in 21 was the most dramatic finish in F1 history. And that moment, every F1 fan will remember pretty much forever. And then you have 22 to 24, especially 22 and 23 were two of the most dominant seasons any driver's ever had in F1 history. And then this would be arguably the greatest comeback in F1 history. So to string those 5 seasons together in a row and that many signature moments, and not just close finishes, but dominant finishes as well along the way, winning races by 20, 30 seconds, even more, I think would really start to build a resume as up there with Schumacher, Hamilton, anybody else. I understand the arguments. I understand, those guys having 7 titles, Max only having 5, and there's still a lot more of his career to play out if he wants to stay in F1 for, another decade plus is certainly on the table. But I think given what we've seen in the last 5 years, it's at least got a fantastic argument for the greatest peak of any driver all time. And I think, if he closes this out, I think he's going to be right there. Even I don't think he's going to be a unanimous number one for sure, but I think he'll certainly be right there in the discussion with a Schumacher, Hamilton, a Senna, anybody else you want to throw in there.
Yeah, I think, people will, if he comes back, wins this championship, and never wins another one, say the car is just never there, or he decides to move on from F1 soon, which is very possible with Max because there's a lot of other things he wants to accomplish. But say he's at 5 with the 5 that he would have, assuming he would get this one done. I think a lot of people will remember 2023 as the type of Max that we had in F1 of just running away with every race and not having to compete with anyone. But if you really look at it, he would have 3 of those 5 championships that would be very hard fought. In 3 of those 5 where he would arguably not have had the best car. 2021, that Red Bull and the Mercedes were, virtually equal on pace. They were very, very close. Last year, I think for the majority, he had a worse car than the McLaren. And this year, obviously, he has a worse car than the McLaren and maybe even the Mercedes, and sometimes maybe even the Ferrari too. So it would, very big picture stuff here with Max, but I think people would remember him a little bit differently than it actually, than he actually was on track of just outperforming with, equal to or less machinery than the guys around him, just because of how dominant that 2023 was.
No, I get that, but I think it's also a credit to him that he can win those races so dominantly as well. He can do it all. He has the wheel-to-wheel racecraft when it's tight, and he also can go out and qualify on pole and just run away from everyone. So I think I can certainly see that. I'll always remember those couple seasons, as kind of, for lack of a better term, at times they were boring because it was Max qualifies first, wins the race constantly. But I don't think there's any way you could say that Max has had a boring career or he's been a boring champion, because anytime he's had to fight, it's been a heck of a fight. And we've shown, he's shown time and time again that he's not going to back down to anyone and will be aggressive, very aggressive on track, at times to a fault. So this is not, I definitely see where you're coming from. And I'm always going to remember parts of his career that way as not the most entertaining seasons of F1, but I think that's by no fault of his own. And I also think that we'll remember the wheel-to-wheel fights with the likes of Hamilton and Leclerc and lately Norris and Piastri. Those are the things we're going to remember, I think, just as much as the dominant wins where he's going away and, we don't see him for 50 laps on the broadcast because there's nothing to show.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I hope that, in the end he's remembered for those moments and those, close fights and not the I mean, there's something to be said for the dominance of that 2023 season, but it also made a lot of people not want to see Max win, and I get it because during that season it was like anybody but Max at a point. And it was nothing against him. It was just it was so dominant that you just wanted to see something different happen. So I hope that I just hope that that doesn't taint like his long term, the way that people remember him long term, that 2023 season. But I think you're right. I think people will remember all of those close battles as well. Well, let's move on to the McLaren guys here, and just another weekend where it probably wasn't enough for McLaren. There were moments where they looked good, but what happens in the sprint, obviously not what they want. I don't think it was, I obviously wasn't Lando's fault, and I don't think it was Oscar's fault. It just kind of a turn one at COTA type situation where everyone gets squeezed together and it collects both the McLarens. And then, in the race, Piastri just never really looking like he was much of a threat. Leclerc on those soft tires, to his credit at the start, is able to get past Norris, and that holds Norris up for a while. I'm not sure if Norris would have been able to, pass Verstappen in the end. We've obviously seen those two go at it before, and usually Max is the one that comes out on top of those battles just with his defense. So I think second was probably the best that Lando was going to do today. So in a sense, you could say Lando maximized the Grand Prix. The sprint, obviously not, but that also wasn't anything Lando could do there. So, you can make cases for a decent weekend for Lando. Obviously, though, not what what Oscar was looking for. And we had this idea and this character of Oscar, I guess, for the first 15 races of this season of him being like the Iceman, cool, calm, collected. Nothing gets to him, just steady on track, lays down great lap after great lap, and kind of cruises to the championship in that manner. But with the way that these past 4 or 5 races have turned out, is that Iceman narrative, that character around Piastri dead, or is he just lacking pace at the moment? Like, is it something bigger to where it's a mental thing that the championship is getting this close to him, combined with some of the papaya rules that he doesn't think have been, laid out fairly, or is he just not finding it with the car at the moment? Is it just much more of a simple issue than that?
I think if the perception is that he was infallible and that nothing could get him down or deter him, that he was just consistent, smooth as always, then I definitely think it's taken a big hit in the last month or so. I mean, Baku is one of the worst weekends we've seen from a title contender maybe ever, and then this weekend was certainly not up to par. The sprint race, we can argue about whether or not that was his fault, whether or not it was his fault. He certainly didn't mean to take out Lando, but whether or not the accident as a whole was his fault is definitely debatable. But even the feature race, never really puts any pressure on Hamilton or Leclerc ahead of him. Just kind of, stumbles home to pretty mediocre weekend for him. So I think it's certainly taking a big hit. I don't want to say that he can't come back from it. He certainly can. I still believe in his talent. I still think he's one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and certainly a guy that can, he could bounce right back and win in Mexico. And, I would be impressed, but I wouldn't be shocked or even surprised. But that being said, I think this idea of him being Mr. Consistent maybe was a little bit unfair to him in the sense that nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Even the greatest of all time will. But I do think it's taken a little bit of a hit these last few races, just with between his performance and also the frustration with the team, the clear, feeling like he's been uh, sent to the back seat at times, like he hasn't been prioritized properly by the team. I think it's clearly something mental going on, just as far as maybe the pressure of the championship. But like I said, I think is totally within the realm of him just to snap back out of it this week and come back and win, or it could be another disappointing performance. I really don't expect to, uh, really don't know what to expect this weekend, frankly, from Oscar, but I'm excited to see how he responds after another difficult weekend in Austin.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think that that Iceman mentality that was given to him, I think in a lot of ways is fair and was fair, but also it's definitely there's definitely been cracks in that armor that we've seen the past 4, 5, 6 races. Um, you go back to that incident in Monza where Lando has the slow pit stop. That whole situation, uh, and Oscar's told to let Lando back through. He does, obviously very frustrated about it. Then the Singapore thing happens. Uh, Obviously frustrated about what happened there as well, and the way that the inner team rules have been applied. Um, I think that that's probably what's gotten to him more and gotten under his skin more than obviously the championship pressure is mounting. It's going to mount on anyone. If they say they don't feel the pressure, they're going to be lying to some extent. Um, but I do think that he's able to handle that pressure. I think it's the pressure combined with the way that he feels the papaya rules have been unfairly laid out against him. That I think those two things combined have started to break up that kind of melt that ice a little bit. If you're considering him the Iceman of just being out there, being cool and calm all the time. So and I get it. I think he has the right to be frustrated with it at times as well, just because those rules are what they are, and we all know it's a little confusing how they've been laid out so far. But also, if you look at these tracks that we have at the end of the season, he didn't necessarily perform well at these tracks last year either. I think part of it might be that these tracks just don't suit him as well as what we had in the beginning of the year. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think, obviously the car just hasn't been quite as good. I think you've seen that with Lando too, of just struggling a little bit. But I think that it combined with the worst tracks for Oscar, a car that's not handling quite as well as it was the first half of the season, the championship pressure, and then the papaya rules. That's just a big storm for a guy to, a guy to handle fighting for his first championship and his first crack at having a real chance at it. So I think it's a mix of both in the end that's kind of getting to Piastri here.
It is, and that was the point that I was going to make, is that it's his first time fighting for a title. I know that Lando got a little taste of it last year, but Oscar was not really in that fight. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely a lot, especially with the regulation changes coming next year. You got to think, if you're one of these drivers, you know, they may have a better idea than we do as to who is going to be a top dog next year, but nobody really knows for sure. And there's a chance, even though we've heard good things about Mercedes and their development with the engine partnership with McLaren, there's always potential that McLaren comes out and they're a midfield team next year, or even worse. I mean, we've seen them struggle even under Zach Brown's leadership there. We've seen them struggle at times mightily. So you've got to think, even though they could come out and be the best team again, there's also a chance that it reverses on them, and this is your only chance to win an F1 title and to put that on your resume. So There's just so many uncertainties in the world of F1 as far as who's going to be on top in a given year, uh, especially with new regs. I think if you're Oscar or Orlando, you've got to be thinking, this might be my one chance. I have to go for it. I have to give it all that I've got. And so there's going to be a lot of extra pressure, I think, on both Oscar and Lando. Um, Lando's had his difficulties with it last year, especially, and I think Oscar's kind of feeling the heat right now. Again, that doesn't mean he can't respond, but the last few races, I don't know if it's the feeling of Max getting closer. Maybe it is a little more now than it was a couple races ago, or if it's just a feeling like you're so close. Obviously, Lando's put the pressure on too for the whole season. So um, just that feeling of being so close yet so far away, I think, is really weighing on Oscar. Obviously, he'd be the only one to know that. But from afar, it definitely looks like there's been some struggles with everything that you've mentioned, with the car maybe regressing a little bit, with the inter-team politics, and just the mounting pressure to get this done in case this is his only opportunity or one of the only opportunities that he ever gets.
Yeah, I think it's all fair though. I'm not, criticizing him in the extent of criticizing someone in sports. I'm not saying uh, I think it's a little unfair to criticize him too heavily just because he's a young guy. He's his first real opportunity at this, and I kind of had that same leeway for Lando last year, where it's your first time in this situation. Um, Not everybody is going to take to that right away. It might take a couple tries before you understand what it takes to win a championship when it all comes down to it in those last few races. So it's natural, and it's just a part of the way it is. But I also don't think it's something that Oscar's not going to be able to recover from in these last 5 races. I still think it's all right there for Oscar as well, to finish off this championship. Moving to Lando, you'd have to wonder if he's, and I feel like this is a question we've asked for the last 5 races, if Lando's done enough to make a real impact on the championship. He's slowly getting closer and closer to Oscar. If you look since what happened, at the Dutch Grand Prix, where his retirement, getting 0 points there, Oscar going on to win. He's got finishes of second, seventh, third, and second. So other than that seventh, he's driving fine. Um, to me, this weekend, I don't think. I do think he did enough this weekend, just because I think Max was the fastest. I think being out in front, and starting from pole, I don't think anyone was gonna get past Max there. Um, and if Lando would have finished behind Charles this weekend, I think you could say he didn't do enough, but he was able to get that second place, while Oscar finished back in fifth. I think it was a good weekend for Lando here overall. I think the one where he really didn't do enough was, and we'll go back to this as well, multiple times for the rest of the season and in the off season, is Baku, with that horrible, the weekend that you would, never wish upon your worst enemy, for Oscar. And Lando only to get a seventh place out of that. I think that's where he hasn't done enough to close that gap in this championship. The last few races, you could say this little thing here or this little thing there, maybe he's able to make it a little bit closer. Obviously, he'd like to have a win in the last 4 races, while Oscar, has been struggling. I think that's really what Lando would need and would want, but also with the way Max has been driving, Singapore being kind of a difficult track, a different track. I don't think he's underachieved by not winning in these last few races, but I think that the Baku one is the one where you could say he really needed more, at a track like that, with a weekend that Oscar had there too. This weekend, I think he did do enough. even though he still needs more to close that championship gap.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing is that when we look back at the season, if Max ends up winning, I think Baku could end up being the weekend that both McLaren drivers look at
Mm-hmm.
and say, wow, that was our missed opportunity. I think,
Yeah.
to be fair, for Lando, I think the other one would be Canada trying to make that move on Oscar and ending up in the
Yeah.
wall and costing him his race there. So that's not the only one, but really outside of those two races and the DNF, the mechanical failure in the Netherlands. I mean, he's been pretty great all season, been pretty consistently on the podium. I know that, we've talked about him missing out on some opportunities. So, I'm not totally changing my tune and saying that he's been incredible all season, but I think there's certainly been some moments where he could have gotten some more out of the car. That being said, I think this weekend, I think he did a pretty good job. The sprint, it is what it is. Nothing he really could have done there again. Ends up in that incident with Oscar and Hulkenberg and Alonso, just kind of a total mess there. Really not his fault at all. And then the race, like you said, Max was kind of just peak Max this weekend. And, if the McLaren had a better pace advantage, then I think we could have seen Lando fight for that spot. But I think the cars are too close on pace right now, and overtaking is too tough at the moment. We saw that all weekend, some struggles with overtaking, especially with Lando against Leclerc there. We saw
Mm-hmm.
for a number of laps multiple times him struggle to overtake Leclerc, even though McLaren is probably a little faster car. So, yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it certainly was not like an all-time classic race from Lando as far as taking so long to get past Charles. But at the end of the day, you come home P2, and it
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. I think he really, did pretty much about as much as he could this weekend. I think of all the weekends to nitpick for him, I think it would be Baku and then a couple of the other ones earlier in the season, like we mentioned. So,
Yeah.
I think he's done. I think he did enough this weekend. I don't know if he's done enough overall
Mm-hmm.
as a grand total. More there to answer your question.
Yeah, and the only thing from this race that I think Lando could have done better, and obviously he eventually gets past Charles there in the end, and the way he did it in that second attempt at passing Charles, I think was really good. Getting close, realizing that his tires were getting a little too hot, needing to back off, and then mounting another charge, and making a really nice overtake there on that back straight. I really liked that. The first half. Him trying to get past Charles. I know Charles was doing really good job at defending, but I also think, and this is a larger thing with Lando that I've been talking about for a while, is he's not right now. Like I just don't think he's a great overtaker. Um, like we see him struggle against Max. And Max is a really hard guy to pass, so there's some leeway there. But then we've seen it with Charles this weekend. Of I just don't think he has that ultimate confidence in the end when he's going to overtake. A lot of the time he opts trying to pass on the outside, which I just think is, it never really works. It's safer in that you're not. I feel like there's less of a chance of getting in an accident, but he just it makes it harder to actually get the overtake done. And he just kept trying to go around the outside in that first half of the race, and I just didn't think that was really ever going to work. That overtake in the second half was a lot better. He went down the inside, really took it, and made that corner his. He was ahead at that corner anyways with the DRS, but going to the inside, he made it to where it was it wasn't really going to be possible for Charles to defend there. So that's the only thing that I would think that I would nitpick on, like you said, from this weekend. Uh, but ultimately he is able to get the pass done. If he gets it done a little sooner in that first half, who knows? Maybe he's able to run Max down. But then he also has to pass Max. And like I said, I just don't see that happening in that race. So, that'd be the only thing. Other than that, though, I do think it was a solid weekend for Lando. His strength is, just raw race pace. You saw that when he pulled away from Leclerc, when he was able to pass him in the end. He just needs to get better at that overtaking, I think. And, I think that's also part of building Lando into, that second, that next tier of driver that he could reach.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something that uh, we both brought up, especially you throughout the season, is your frustrations with the overtaking, and I think that combined with the struggles to start races, is kind of a recipe for
Mm-hmm.
disaster. That's something we've talked about over and over
Yeah.
again. It's something that I feel like hasn't been as much of a struggle recently, so
Yeah.
maybe he's getting a little bit better in that department, but that goes back to just making too many little
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. Reading his results, it looks pretty impressive. I've seen a lot of podiums, and there are a lot of good performances in there. But there's also some races where he was P3, could have been P1 with
Mm-hmm.
the car that they had, and that kind of thing. So, that really adds up over the course of a season, and I think that's kind of what's separating him from someone like Max or even Charles or George is just that level of racecraft. He clearly has some great pace. I mean, we saw like his Monaco lap this year was one of the best qualifying laps we've seen in a long time. It's clearly there. Just some racecraft and those little moments like those make the difference between winning a championship and falling short in a title battle like this.
Yeah, I think I've always been on, that's his biggest weakness. And it kind of seems like it's just, but you go back to Singapore in that opening lap and kind of taking care of two of his, his biggest issues was, starting, and that was a great start. And then also overtaking, being very confident and aggressive there against his teammate. So, you see it getting better. But it's just there's still times where I wish he would, do a little bit more and just be a little bit more aggressive. Like you saw with George, where he tries to make that pass on Max in the sprint race, never really had a chance of actually doing it. But I like that he sent it up there and was willing to be a little bit aggressive with it and make that attempt at a pass, force the other guy into a mistake maybe or something. Um, let's move to our personal podiums. In my one spot, I'm sure it's yours as well. Max Verstappen wins the sprint, wins the race, just makes that title fight, that title charge, just a little bit more real and reels it back in. So that's my guy, my top step for this weekend. I'm sure it's yours as well, but I'll let you answer that and see if we have the same top step or not.
It is mine. Yeah, we've talked before about when a guy has a weekend that dominant. I have a hard time not putting him in first on our personal podiums, and even if they have a very slight pace advantage to the rest of the field, it's not by much, especially to McLaren. So, this wasn't one of those weekends we talked about in 22 or 23 where they had a massive pace advantage and the best driver. He had to work for this one a little more and a couple of the ones recently. So very, very impressive weekend. Max number one here, and definitely the title battle is on.
Yeah, in my two spot, I have Charles Leclerc. I think that they started the weekend pretty much nowhere, and he was able to turn that into a podium in the end in the main race on Sunday, and that defending on Norris, like we had just talked about, I think was really really good in the beginning. I liked him starting on those softs. So that's probably a team decision, but I like that for him being aggressive there. And it just seemed a lot more confident and in a lot better spot with that Ferrari by the end of the weekend than at the beginning. So to go from where they were, which was nowhere, to a podium, I think it was a really, really good weekend for Charles in the end.
Yeah, I've actually gone the same way for number two. I know we try and switch it up a little bit, but I think there was a really strong argument. I think if Max wasn't so dominant, I think Charles would have been driver of the day.
Hmm.
It kind of makes sense when you have him number two, but he was so good in this race to keep Lando behind for so long uh, in multiple stints throughout this race. Um, showed good pace throughout the weekend. Hamilton did too, showed a better pace. So it looks like the Ferrari in general is just in a better spot right now. But uh, his racecraft was fantastic to keep Lando behind while still avoiding a collision for that many laps when Lando was clearly desperate to get past. I think this is a heck of a race from him, and I think he's another guy. We talked about this with George a little bit earlier in the year, and then he came up and won a race, like you said, kind of out of nowhere in Singapore. But Charles, it feels like it's kind of been an under the radar year for him, just compared to, a couple years ago, we got a little bit of a title, not a full title fight, but it looked like he had a good chance at the beginning of the year against Max. And then, um, last year he had the wins at Monaco and Monza, big race wins for him. It kind of feels like it's been an under the radar year for him where he's just kind of fighting to get those podiums. But it's races like this that remind you how impressive he is, not just with the one lap qualifying pace, but also with the racecraft at times as well.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you do forget about Leclerc in this whole for the past couple seasons, really, with the McLarens charging up and then Max as well. But he does deliver some really nice results that just kind of remind you of that, that he's there, and when that car's ready, I think he'll be challenging for the title as well. In my final spot, I have Lando Norris. Actually, solid race. Like we said, I think he maximized what he was capable of this weekend. Not getting caught up in that sprint crash would have helped, but nothing he could do there. And then solid, weekend and significantly faster than his teammate as well. That I think has to put him in my 3 spot. The other guy I was thinking about was Sainz, with the podium in the sprint, really impressive there. But the crash in the main race with Antonelli, to me, just kind of disqualified him, in my personal opinion, from that 3 spot. So I boosted Lando up to P3 on my personal podium.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go a little bit off the path here, just because this guy didn't maximize the points he could have had this weekend, but it wasn't really his fault. And I'm going to go with Nico Hulkenberg for the 3rd spot, just with a P4 qualifying in the sprint in the Sauber is extremely impressive. Been a little bit since they'd shown the pace after the Silverstone podium. They kind of fallen back to earth as a team, but you come back with a P4 on the sprint qualifying, and then the sprint incident obviously he's right in the middle of, but even Zach Brown went up to him and said, it wasn't really his fault, and apologized for calling it amateur hour, his driving out there. So and then he comes back after an incident like that. Would have been easy to kind of fold a little bit for the weekend, but he comes back out and puts it P8 in the race. Still gets some points for Sauber on a weekend where they could have had even more. And really frustrating weekend for Bortoletto. Seemed well off the pace of Hulkenberg, and so just really taking care of business there against his teammate, and also securing some solid points for the team in a weekend where they could have had more, but not really his fault that the cards fell the way they did.
Yeah, speaking of amateur hour, we'll go to Stinker of the Week next. And maybe we should rename Stinker of the Week Amateur Hour or Amateur Minute or something. We'll figure that out. But for my Stinker of the Week this week, I have to go with Oscar Piastri. I think this is probably the first time I've had him in Stinker of the Week, and just from everything, maybe I had him in Baku. I'm not sure. If I didn't, I probably should have. But regardless, this weekend, other than Baku, his worst of the season. Australia, yeah, worst finish, but he was much better throughout the race than what he was this weekend. Just way off the pace all weekend long. obviously is in the middle of that sprint crash as well. Not really sure who to blame there. To me, it's more of just a racing incident. But regardless, he's in it, loses out on those points, loses big on points to Verstappen and Norris in the actual race. In fifth, where he just looked nowhere, really running a race of his own. So I got to go with Piastri here for kind of an out of the ordinary stinker of the week for Oscar Piastri for me.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the sprint race here again for my stinker of the week, although it kind of ties in to the main race as well. And I'm gonna go with Lance Stroll here.
Real
Just
amateur hour.
Well, yeah. So there's two reasons for this. The race, he, he loses to Alonso, but it's not like an awful race from him. Comes home 12th. We know the Aston Martin hasn't been unbelievable pace-wise recently, but really this is more of a Saturday award because Saturday in the sprint race, first of all, he punts Ocon, just one of the worst attempts at an overtake I think I've ever seen.
A truly
Frankly,
diabolical move.
it's just, I mean, I don't know what he was thinking, honestly. Most of the times I can at least see the vision from these guys, see where they want to go. I was lost on that one. Don't see how he was making that corner, especially turn one at Austin. And then he follows
When
that up
they showed
Saturday
that on
afternoon.
board, it
Mhm.
was like I was like, and I knew that they were eventually going to crash. I was like, did he just lose the brakes? Like, what happened? There's no way that he actually tried to overtake from here, and then he actually sent it. I was like, oh my gosh, that is the most diabolical move I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, that was truly a one of a kind. I'm not sure anybody else on the grid would have attempted that one, frankly. Um,
Yeah,
so then he does
the
he
last of
does
the
that
late breakers.
exactly. Yeah, he does that early on Saturday, and then he comes out and qualifies 18th on Saturday afternoon, which again is bad. Not all time bad though, but I came across an article that said that Stroll has now lost to Alonso in 30 consecutive qualifyings. And I've looked at the data and I counted it twice, and I think it might actually be 31. Regardless, he has lost to Alonso in every GP qualifying this year, and at least half of last year back to Silverstone. Um,
Are
so
you serious?
yeah, no, dead serious. I can send you the article, but it's
What? How is
yeah,
this not being
yeah.
talked about more?
Well, you know what the crazy thing is too is that he's actually in that time. I think he's out qualified like pretty much every other driver in at least one race. Like somebody just had a bad weekend and maybe
Yeah.
not Max or something, but almost everyone else he is out qualified at some point, and but not Alonso. So the website I'm looking at says 30. I thought I counted 31. Regardless, the point stands. I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.
since Silverstone last year that Stroll has been out qualified by Alonso. Granted, one of the all-time great drivers, but I believe 44-year-old has been out qualified every single race back to last summer. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Is kind of a slam dunk. It's more than this week, but just another in a long line of frustrating qualifyings for Lance.
That's insane. You think at one point in there he would have gotten lucky, and it's not like, yeah, Fernando's a much better driver than Lance Stroll. Like it's just, I'm not trying to crap on Lance Stroll. It's just a fact. But like we see these disparities. We've seen it with Verstappen and Perez before. We've seen it with Verstappen and Yuki before, but it's not like it's like that big of a gap between these two. It's almost like that takes like effort, like to actually go that long and not and then also the fact that they're not that far off in points in the championship, and he hasn't managed to out qualify him once in the season and beyond.
Yeah, I did see someone joke about that they're only, I think, 2 points off each other in the championship, and that now it's up to five. But the fact that they're so close in the championship just shows Stroll's elite racecraft and race pace, which, you know, don't know if I
That is
agree
insane.
with that, but I'm sure he also was not being serious when he said that. So, uh, yeah, it's it's like you said, it's you almost have to try to get out qualified 30 times in a row,
Yeah.
especially in that car, which is not like it's P1 every week. So, uh, yeah, truly astounding. The only other one that's close, to be fair, is Max has outqualified his teammate 25 races in a row. Um, but that's been a
Yeah.
rotating
But
cast,
yeah.
and not one guy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just it's kind of a more than this week award, but uh, the two mistakes on Saturday just kind of amplified uh, what's been kind of a rough stretch for Lance Stroll.
Well, shout out Lance Stroll. That's bad. I'm sorry, but that's that's real bad. That's almost unbelievable. Um, yeah. Anyways, okay. Well, let's move on to a couple of last things here before we wrap up. Mercedes, they extend both drivers' contracts. We all kind of thought this was coming. The yearly Max to Mercedes rumors died off, and they went back to George and Kimmy and secured them for another season. You got any thoughts on this one, or kind of just what we expected? And good driver lineup, and nice to secure those guys for another in at least another few seasons.
Yeah, I think it's what I expected. The Max thing, once that was dead in the water, there's really nowhere else to go. I think Kimmy certainly had an up and down season.
Mm-hmm.
Has not always had super bright moments, but has also had a lot of great moments. The sprint pole in Miami and the podium as well, and it has had some real moments where you feel like you can see the potential. So I think it's definitely worth giving him another season and seeing more what he can do. And George, has been outstanding this year. Outside of Max, I think there's a real argument for him being the best driver on the grid, at least up there with a couple other guys. So I think that's a slam dunk. Bring him back no matter what. So for me, this is kind of what I expected, and also think it's the right decision to at least give Yuki one more year, and then give George as many years as you can get him, at least for the extended future here.
Yeah, George is one of those guys. I think there's only a couple guys on the grid that you would replace George with if you're Mercedes. And Kimmy, I think there's been downs, there's been ups as well, and I just think it's been kind of a typical rookie season for a guy. Come in, make your mistakes. We have a good car, not a great car, not a championship winning car. So make your mistakes, learn from it, and then next year's is where we're really going to need to see Kimmy step it up and make that leap with new regulations and everything like that. If Mercedes can bring a car that we all think that they're going to bring, which seems to be pretty good for 2026, then that's when we'll really see, I think, what we're getting from Kimmy. And the last thing, F1, they announced a big deal with Apple TV for to host its races in the U.S. For 2026, not on ESPN anymore next year, moving to Apple TV. Any quick thoughts? I really, I've seen the headlines for this. I haven't really looked into it too much and what it's going to look like for the consumer. But just do you have any thoughts on this deal with Apple TV and F1 for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think for the fans, I don't think it's a bad deal. I think the important thing is it looks like they're going to keep F1 TV, all that premium content. You have to have an Apple subscription to get it, but just having
Okay.
that option, it looked like for a while there they were going to cut F1 TV,
Yeah.
that was going to be part of the deal on Apple's end. So the fact that it looks like that's staying in the deal, I think makes it a win for the fans. And I do
Yeah.
wonder more so on the F1 angle, like the company itself and the series. I wonder if it's going to affect the popularity a little bit in the U.S. I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to totally go back to where it was. I think it's carved out its own little space in the U.S., and I think it's doing very well. But I do wonder if the viewership is going to take a little bit of a hit here, just moving from something like ESPN, where they can advertise these races, on other sports, and they can also show races on ABC, which makes a massive viewing difference from ESPN or ESPN2. And Apple TV obviously doesn't have any of those angles. I mean, they have their own sports products, MLS. They've got some MLB and some other sports as well, but it's just not the same as ESPN's catalog. So um, I am worried a little bit for the F1 future in the U.S. just from a viewership and rating standpoint. But I don't think it's a terrible deal for the fans, and maybe there's a world where it reaches a new audience on Apple and builds some momentum. But I definitely a little bit cautious about short-term gains here for F1 financially versus the long-term benefit of being somewhere that's more visible, like ESPN and ABC.
Yeah, I think that's a great analyzation of what's going on. I really hadn't thought about that it will have a big effect on ratings, and just not as many people are going to be able to see it not being on ESPN or the big races, the races here in the US or Monaco or a couple others being on ABC. What will hurt ratings in the end, and make it harder to watch. I mean, putting it behind another streaming service, not everyone has that. It will be harder to watch in the US. But keeping F1 TV, and having that as an option for the F1 consumer in the US, I think is a really good thing. So I think for the diehard fan, the person who watches every week, watches qualifying, watches, even some of the practice sessions, I don't think that they will be really too affected by this. They'll get the Apple TV subscription if they don't already have it. They'll use their F1 TV, whatever it is, they'll keep watching. I just think those extra, those extra viewers that you get that turn it on just to watch the race on Sunday on ESPN or ABC, or just flipping through and see it. I think that it will hurt their. It'll hurt their, I guess, ratings and their long term bottom line in that sense. Moving it off of TV and onto a streaming platform.
Yeah, I agree. That's something we talked about with IndyCar earlier this
Mm-hmm.
year about getting races on NBC itself will have a massive effect
Yeah,
versus FS1 or getting races on Fox, pardon me,
yeah,
compared to having them on FS1 or NBC Sports Network or whatnot. That having the visibility of Fox as a main channel is going to be a massive boost, and it was a nice boost for some of IndyCar's big races. So not having that ABC boost will be important, and even just not being on a normal TV channel, being on ESPN, may affect things a little bit. But hopefully, it finds a new audience on Apple, and hopefully, all these premium options, if they're available to the Apple TV customer, I think, it may increase the awareness of those to some fans, and uh, get more fans watching the onboards and all the other great things that F1 TV offers. So it could both be a benefit to the fans, but also a little bit harmful to the series long term.
yeah. I agree. Um, I think that's everything on my end. Just the really last thing that I have. What Alpine did to Colapinto, holding him up, uh, telling him he couldn't pass Gasly, even though it was for 17th place. And then, Colapinto actually going for it and making the move, and, just saying, whatever, I'm going to make the move because there's no reason to hold position. A, we're fighting over 17th, and B, I'm way faster than Gasly at this point. I just thought that whole debacle was fun to watch for when you're getting to the closing laps of the race, and the broadcast switches over to an inter-team Alpine battle for 17th as a storyline. I just thought was really funny to watch play out.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of complaints from fans the week before that they weren't showing enough of the racing. So to
Yeah.
actually show that Alpine battle, I think was pretty exciting. But yeah, just really absurd team orders there. I don't, just another week of Alpine nonsense. Uh, like I said, after Baku, they've already punted on the season, so hopefully they can at least provide some
That is true.
entertainment these last five or so races. I will say, Colapinto ignoring the team orders definitely reminded me of why I enjoyed watching him
Mhm.
so much last year. I feel like this
Yeah.
year he's been a little bit more of a background character, for lack of a better term, with how bad Alpine's been, and just hasn't been much of a factor. Although his race pace has improved compared to Gasly recently, it hasn't mattered much. So yeah, I mean that was nice to see something a little bit different from the back of the field, and even though it was kind of an absurd team order, it's
Yeah.
still a funny way to end the race. That's for sure.
Poor Doohan though. He couldn't even, they couldn't even let him stick out a full season on a team that's literally already said they're moving on to next year, not even really trying for this year. Yeah, they could have at least let him try it out for just get a full season in and kind of see where it goes. I get it. He wasn't doing great, but it was also like what 5, 6 races into the season that they dumped him. I think they could have given him a little more time, but that's
Yeah, I mean what they should have done. I mean, I'm half joking when I say this, but it honestly would have been fun to see was to actually probably can't do this because of contracts, but dump Gasly for the last like 5 or 6 races, not permanently. Bring him back next year, obviously, but you give Gasly a couple months early break, and then you
yeah,
let Colapinto and duel it out at the end of the season. That would have been a lot of fun to see, or
yeah,
maybe more realistically, let them switch out races or something. I don't. I know we said earlier in the year that they shouldn't do that. That they should just stick with somebody, but at this point, what do you have to lose? It would be good entertainment, and it would give them a clearer picture of what to do next year.
yeah. At this point, it's just kind of for fun, right? Like, just hold open tryouts. Let anyone walk up and try and drive the car. See what happens. Just
Mm-hmm.
have a all alternating cast of candidates from just let some F2 guys just, hey, you wanna ride? Well, just pay us like $1 million for the race and you can have it. I'm sure some people would take it. I mean, what are you gonna do? I think that's probably what Alpine should go for at this point. I'm sure Gasly wouldn't mind getting an early start to the winter break if they're fighting over 17th with team orders. I don't think he's gonna mind getting a little bit of an early break there.
Yeah, they should let one of us go.
Yeah,
I could bring it home in 20th, bring it home in one piece.
I'm not sure we could bring it home in 20th. I'm not sure we'd bring it home in one piece though.
That's true. Yeah, maybe I'm. Who knows? I don't have the super license points. That would be an issue, but
Yeah,
uh,
if it's anyone like F1 the game, I probably won't bring it home in one piece. So
yeah, no, I'd be willing to do a couple practice sessions. I'll do Super Formula next year, whatever. Just helping give me a call.
oh my gosh, I think that would be incredible. I think you should petition, start a movement to get you in that second Alpine seat.
Yeah, the petition would be titled "You've Got Nothing to Lose."
Yeah, that's a great. I love that block. I think you should continue on that and see where it leads. Oh, well, I think
Yeah,
that's
a couple.
everything for this week.
I got a couple online podiums in F1 the video game, so I think that proves it's like winning national titles in a college football game. Saying
Yeah,
you could be the
you could
head
be
coach.
coached.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's right
with
there.
controller too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, even harder.
Even harder. Oh, I think that's everything for this week. We will be back next week to break down everything from Mexico and to review Sam's first race in F1 as an Alpine driver. Um, yeah, we'll
We'll
see you
see.
guys next week.
We'll see if Stroll can outqualify me instead of Alonso.
We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. And yeah, get ready to watch Sam's first F1 race next weekend.
Yeah, we'll see you there, Mexico City.